Welcome to the Robotics Through Science Fiction podcast. I'm Robin Murphy, and let's talk about what Stan Lee, with his artistic partners, told us about real robots. Stanley Lieber. Stan Lee is synonymous with Marvel Comics. He started with the company when it was founded in 1939 and became an editor at age 19. Was Stan the immensely prolific co-creator of the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, the Hulk, Doctor Strange, Iron Man, and other iconic comic book figures? Or was he a savvy, self-serving editor who exploited artists with work-for-hire contracts? Or both? Esquire magazine has a thoughtful article that attempts to summarize the complexity of the man. But what everyone can agree upon is that Stan Lee held Marvel together through thick and thin, and along the way, he and his fellow artists hit upon 5 important lessons for the robots in their comics and the Marvel Cinematic Universe that hold for robots in the real world. The first lesson, Iron Man. Exoskeletons are more practical than giant piloted mecha. The idea of an Iron Man suit that would protect and enhance the strength of the wearer has been around since the 1960s, with the unsuccessful Hardeman system built by General Electric for the U.S. military. So Stan Lee and Jack Kirby captured both the idea of exoskeletons and the whole exoskeletons being developed by a defense contractor vibe when they created Iron Man in 1963. The real push for and advances in exoskeletons has not been for the military. Exoskeletons are valuable for enhancing the strength and endurance of construction workers. Think Sigourney Weaver wearing that power lifter to even up the fight with a mama alien and aliens. Except instead of mama aliens, think of a diverse workforce where older workers and small women can work at the same jobs as the younger Hulk or Thor-like colleagues. And speaking of back injuries, don't forget smaller, lighter, and more adaptive exoskeletons that target a limb or muscle group are already being used for physical therapy. Wouldn't it be great that if in the near future, instead of a Mark 42 flying in and wrapping itself around Tony or a villain, exoskeletons would fly around, find children with spinal injuries, and help them move? The giant piloted mecha genre, with its overly large and complex robots, that you see in Mazinger Z and the Pacific Rim and the book series The Themis Files, is the opposite of where the scientific field is heading. So none of those systems include an artificial general intelligent assistant like Iron Man's Jarvis. So on top of it, they aren't nearly as cool as they could be. See our Exoskeletons Week and the podcast from Dr. Don Peterson, an expert in exoskeletons, for a lively discussion, and my Science Robotics article on the science fact about exoskeletons in science fiction. And they'll give a general summary of exoskeletons. A really good, hardcore technical introduction to the challenges of exoskeleton is in the Springer Handbook of Robotics. The next lesson is what we learned from Jarvis, that the user interface to a robot is really, really important. Stan Lee and Don Heck introduced the human Jarvis in 1964 as the Marvel comic book version of Michael Caine's canonical butler Alfred in Batman. Jarvis became the artificial intelligence Jarvis, just another rather very intelligent system, in the first Iron Man movie, which Tony Stark accesses through his Iron Man suit. Jarvis was primarily a software decision aid, but since it could control physical assets, it counts as a robot. In later movies, Jarvis controlled Iron Man's suits and thus really truly became a physically situated agent. Jarvis is more than a natural language-based user interface. He's a teammate, a true partner, which is why he's a great example of human-robot interaction. Human-robot interaction is more than just providing a natural form of communication, spoken language, pointing, etc., for a better natural user interface. It's about how the human and robot work together as a joint cognitive system to get the job done. The idea of a human and robot working as a team seems an appropriate descriptor of how teleoperation works, but not if the robot was delegated a task to handle autonomously some sort of job, which we call taskable agency. In the Iron Man movies, even when Jarvis is acting autonomously while Tony is doing something else, Jarvis has to understand Tony's intent or anticipate Tony's real intent. He has to report back when done and let him know if something's going wrong. This is why it's called an interaction instead of an interface. The fundamental transactions between Tony and Jarvis are more than Tony selecting options or delegating tasks or Jarvis giving an audible warning. They are bidirectional cognitive transactions. See the human-robot interaction topic link for a list of books and movies that touch on human-robot interaction. Also, my book, Robotics Through Science Fiction, Artificial Intelligence Explained Through 6 Classic Robot Stories, has a chapter on HRI which provides a light introduction using the ultimate tale of a social robot, Super Toys Last All Summer. A good technical introduction to the challenges in creating a teammate like Jarvis is the classic paper, 10 Challenges for Making Automation a Team Player. So catch that as well. Thor, the Destroyer. Teleoperation allows a person to see and act and destroy remotely. Loki sends out the large, tough destroyer robot briefly in the first Thor movie, the origin story one, not the third funny Planet Hulk one and not the second totally forgettable one. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby had introduced the Destroyer in the Thor comics back in 1965. The robot required the life force of a person in order to operate, which is a great way to think about teleoperation. The robot has a person investing some amount of their effort in controlling it. Teleoperation is often assumed to be a degenerate case of autonomy because in the 1960s, if it was too hard to program an autonomous capability, then you were forced to have the human in the loop. Roboticists refer to having a person involved as human supervisory control, which is now a very wide and diverse field. But many applications of robots are about giving a person real-time remote presence into a distal environment, one where the human can't directly see the robot or the environment. For example, telecommuting, telemedicine, and disaster response are all about a human being able to remotely see and act in real time. Historically, the robot is called the telefactor and the human the teleoperator, but that terminology is rare now. Originally, the big challenge in teleoperation was latency, as NASA was trying to teleoperate robot arms in space from ground control on Earth with seconds of communication delays. Now, with the emergence of telecommuting and telecommunication with high-speed internet, the research challenges are about how to make the robot a good partner. For example, a cowboy doesn't have to tell a horse, leg up, leg down, but set the speed, kicks the horse with spurs, and the horse figures out the best gait for the terrain that meets the goal. And in many movies, and real life, the horse is often smarter than the cowboy. And to alert the rider to the presence of angry Indians, snakes, and other bad situations. So see the teleoperation topic link for more books and movies that touch on teleoperation. John Scalzi's Lock-In and Head-On books are very accurate. Also, Robotics Through Science Fiction, Artificial Intelligence Explained Through 6 Classic Robot Stories has a chapter on teleoperation for a light introduction. And also, a very good hardcore technical introduction to teleoperation is Tom Sheridan's book, Telerobotics, Automation, and Human Supervisory Control, which remains the classic text. The X-Men, the Sentinels. And there we learn that programming a robot with behaviors is very effective. What could be a better example of incorporating basic biological intelligence principles into a robot than those mutant-hunting Sentinels that plague the X-Men? When Stan Lee and Jack Kirby introduced these robots in 1965, the two artists were aiming to combine the relentlessness of factory automation with the intelligence of predators, but in a way that was possible for the X-Men to overcome. As a result, they managed to stumble upon the behavior-based robotics paradigm, also called reactive robotics paradigm, well before scientists did. Behavior-based robotics originated in the 1980s, and that was a reaction to the lack of progress with planning-oriented artificial intelligence. After the early success of Shaky, which was the first artificial intelligence robot in 1969, roboticists had become consumed with deliberation and planning. The belief was that the only way to make a robot do anything intelligent, even just walk across a room, was to plan every step and reason about every object. Planning is computationally hard and time-consuming, and it's overkill. A cockroach is pretty dumb, but it seems the majority of them manage to quickly flee or hide in a room. Cockroaches, fish, frogs, sheep, they aren't planning or performing deliberation. They're reacting, such as reflexively running away from cues of a predator, like turning on the lights makes most species of cockroaches run away, or stay near an area with food until the amount of food begins to exceed the amount that's being found. That's foraging. These neural sense-act packages are called behaviors by animal researchers. For example, when the gunslinger in the original Westworld comes after Richard Benjamin, it uses Benjamin's heat and audio signature to track him. Yul Brynner's gunslinger isn't really smarter than a mosquito, just deadlier. And the same goes for the Sentinels and the X-Men. They aren't too bright, but they are smart enough to be deadly. While insects and animals aren't necessarily smart enough to take over the world Skynet style, they are intelligent. And humans use that same behavior-based intelligence as part of the lower brain. So a new cadre of roboticists started focusing on this lower behavior-based style, and the most famous is MIT's Rod Brooks and his work that led to the Roomba. For a light introduction, Robotics Through Science Fiction, Artificial Intelligence Explained Through 6 Classic Robot Stories has a chapter on behavior-based robotics. Ron Arkin's book, Behavior-Based Robotics, is the classic text. And speaking of Jarvis, let's talk about the lesson learned from Vision, which is being moral and ethical isn't just for humans, it's important for robots too. When Vision picked up Thor's hammer and handed it to him, it was clear that Vision was probably a better man than even Steve Rogers. When Stan Lee, John Buscema, and Roy Thomas created Vision in 1968, they probably didn't anticipate Vision becoming an exemplar of how a sentient robot might become a moral machine. Robot ethics is currently being debated in the robotics community, and these discussions often focus on the robot as an artificial general intelligence, and thus is expected to be a full moral agent that is trustworthy, aware of ethical situations like killing people, and explicitly reasons about good decisions. Well, in theory, we would have programmed or trained the AGIs to be moral. That worked with Vision, but not so much with Ultron in Avengers: The Age of Ultron. But most robots aren't an AGI, so this ability to conduct Vision-like reasoning to help people isn't really possible. Instead, the dumber, moralistic robots are used for situations that require ethical sensitivities. For example, warfighting. But other examples are medical decision aids and systems with autonomy, such as autopilot. In these functional morality situations, the ethical requirement is often just to work correctly. That requirement to just work correctly is also a key component of operational morality, the expectation that the designers and users of a robot are using this responsibly. So robot ethics starts with the designers being responsible in the design and the correctness of their implementation, which is operational morality, especially for safety critical or ethically sensitive situations, which is functional morality, and then someday the robots could include situations where an AGI robot would reason and make its own decisions about what was ethical. That's full moral agency. See the ethics topic link for books and movies that touch on ethics. Robotics Through Science Fiction, Artificial Intelligence Explained Through 6 Classic Robot Stories has a chapter on ethics which concentrates on the operational morality of the weaponization of robots using Philip K. Dick's story, Second Variety. The Foundation for Responsible Robotics is a great place to start exploring robot ethics, and the We Robots Conference is an annual event that brings together jurists, philosophers, and engineers. So to summarize, here are the lessons that roboticists can learn from Stan Lee and apply to real robots. From Iron Man, that exoskeletons are more practical than giant piloted mecha. Jarvis, the user interface to a robot is really, really important. From the Destroyer, teleoperation allows a person to see and act remotely. From the X-Men Sentinels, programming a robot with behaviors is very effective. And from Vision, being moral and ethical isn't just for humans, it's important for robots too. You know, all of these lessons were from the 1960s and hold today, which is pretty remarkable. And that brings us to Robotics Through Science Fiction, Artificial Intelligence Explained Through 6 Classic Robot Stories, where all the short stories were from the 1960s and 1970s, because they have some of the most thoughtful and accurate discussions of how robots really work. So, enjoy Marvel Cinematic Universe and grab a copy of Robotics Through Science Fiction. And if you haven't subscribed to our newsletter and YouTube channel, please do so you won't miss a thing.